Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and what a profound and humbling honor, as it always is, to address the Congress, the House of Representatives here in our nation's capital, and of course, doing so on behalf of my incredible constituents in Southeast Michigan, and on behalf of all residents of Michigan and this great nation. For you see, the exercise of our democracy is ensconced and inscribed here in our House chamber and on our House floor. We use our vote, we use our voice, and we use both accordingly to move the will of our nation forward. And as you so declared, Mr. Speaker, I am indeed in the minority party. And so to gather time on the House floor is sometimes a struggle. To gather time in a committee is sometimes a struggle. You push for your 1 minute, your 5 minutes, your maybe 15 minutes if you get it. Well, today I've asked for an hour. I asked for an hour because last week we had an hour booked, and of course the House adjourned early, and we all paid witness to the incredible history that a senator from New Jersey gave to this country by breaking the largest filibuster on record. Senator Cory Booker speaking for over 25 hours in the Senate chamber on behalf of the voices of this nation who have questions, the voices of this nation who have questions. Of course, we know that 435 members in the House chamber, and each of us representing about 800,000 people, my colleagues from Rhode Island representing just shy of 500,000 people. In Michigan, I represent just about 800,000 people. We are the 10th largest state in the union with 13 House members and 2 senators here to move the will of our nation and to pass the nation's laws. And it's an interesting thing to do so when the size of the institution is remaining as it has been described somewhat by laws. You know, they said in 1913 we would have 435. They said in 1913 we'd have 435 members, and we haven't added new members to the body since. And I'm not addressing you, Mr. Speaker, to propose controversy. But I am here to speak on behalf of the people of Michigan who deserve fair and equal representation for the taxpayer dollars that they provide to the nation's treasury. So when you look at the largest freshwater basins of our Great Lakes, when you look at the arsenal of democracy, when you see our incredible trades unions from Saginaw up to Iron Mountain working and making and delivering the only polysilicon manufacturing in the nation existing in Michigan in a place called Hemlock by a company called Hemlock, you want to make sure that Michigan has its fair and equal representation. But, Mr. Speaker, it has been a point of frustration for my state of Michigan that in my 41, nearly 42 years of existence on this earth, that my state is always losing representation every time we dare to reapportion the size of the chamber. And now we are a close-knit group, the Michigan delegation. The dean of the Democrats is a woman named Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Take a minute and understand who that is. Deborah Inslee Dingell, the dean of the House Democrats of Michigan, the wife of John Dingell, the daughter-in-law of John Dingell Sr., people who stood in this chamber and passed things of historical importance. John Dingell being the last World War II veteran to serve in this very chamber, Mr. Speaker. He is a respected individual and is still referenced often by colleagues from both sides of the aisle. In fact, I will never forget coming to Congress in 2019, in the 116th session of the Congress. It was my first term, and I got sworn in January, as we do, January 3rd. And I said to my good colleague, Congresswoman Dingell, I said to her, Mr. Speaker, I would very much like to sit down with your husband, because I know a tradition was that he would sit down with all new members. And of course, I wasn't just asking personally. I was asking because we had 4 new members of Congress from Michigan, Mr. Levin, Ms. Tlaib, Ms. Slotkin, and myself. I thought, well, it'd be nice for all 4 of us to maybe meet with the Dingells. And it was winter, and we knew Mr. Dingell's health was failing, or shaky, and it started to fail, and we were supporting Mrs. Dingell as a delegation. Mr. Kildee, Dan Kildee of Flint, was our dean then, and we rallied to show our love and to our support, and tragically we lost Mr. Dingell on an early February day. And it was really quite surreal to be in this very chamber. In my first couple of weeks in this Congress, in the House of Representatives, paying tribute not only to a Michigan legend, but an American legend. And we recognize Mr. Dingell in so many different ways. We recognize Mr. Dingell in speeches on the House floor. The Democratic leadership under Ms. Pelosi and Mr. Hoyer, and even, if we remember him, Mr. McCarthy gave some nice words for Mr. Dingell. I was so surprised, actually, that a member of the opposing party would have such kind and inspirational things to say about the former dean of the House of Representatives, 59 long years. And of course, Mr. Kildee booked us one of these hours, to share with his colleagues from Michigan, to recognize Mr. Dingell. And we each got some time to do so as members. And I used that time to share my reflections about Mr. Dingell, and it was so very humbling. It was never anything I expected to do in my second month in this chamber, but I did it. And the very next day, a sacred and incredible man, Mr. John Lewis, came up to me on the House floor. It's very crowded on the House floor. You notice this when we're voting. It's 435 people packed here on the House floor. You've got staff. It's sometimes hard to move around. You got to get your vote in. You can't get too entranced in a conversation lest you miss a vote. And Mr. Lewis came up to me, and he tapped me on the shoulder. He said to me that he heard my words about his friend John Dingell, and that he appreciated them. And I have shared that story on a few occasions, not necessarily publicly, but I've shared it back in my district and with friends, and in memory of both Johns, both legends, both titans of the 20th century. I've shared it with our Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, as a recognition of the oftentimes torch-passing moments that we find ourselves in American government, and as we push for American change. And it was really something else that Mr. Lewis and I had that exchange, and it caught me by surprise, and sharing it right now is incredibly humbling. And I appreciate and am grateful for the time to be able to do so, Mr. Speaker, on this House floor. We know that we're a nation of great passion, of great debate, of people who come from all over to pay witness to our lawmaking, that people come from all over to get their ideas and their thoughts across, to look up at a Capitol that inspires them, that moves them, that brings together our democracy. Next year, we'll celebrate 250 years of America's very existence as a nation. It's really quite something, 250 years. In some ways, it seems like a long time, and it also seems like a short time. And we know we're still writing America's story. And we know that we don't engage in politics on the House floor, campaigning. But I would just like to make a ethical reflection about our politics, which is at some point an election is had. An election is had and an election happens. And we have to govern. We're governing. We have to govern. And we're always thinking about the last election and then the next election. But we also have to think about governing. We have to look at it responsibly and reasonably. And of course, we recognize that it can feel right now in this moment, if you're not in the governing seat of authority, frustrating for people, for members, for the passions that so many have. I, of course, remember that quite well in the 117th session of Congress. And if it's okay, Mr. Speaker, to recognize what the makeup of that session was, we had a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic President. And of course, we had a country in the early days of 21 that was still reeling from the affects and the implications of a pandemic that wasn't yet over. In fact, people, I believe, if we recall correctly, Mr. Speaker, were just beginning to take that vaccine. We were just beginning to push for people to get vaccinated, not force, okay, because I don't think people want to be forced to do anything, but we wanted to put an end to the pandemic. And a colleague, of course, through the great tradition of our Michigan delegation, a gentleman by the name of Congressman Wahlberg, who is a longtime serving member of this institution and is now the chairman of the Education and Workforce Committee that I sit on. He and I had been working on a resolution together. A resolution, we had actually introduced it in the 116th session of Congress at the very end of the session. And we said to ourselves that, and to the nation with the introduction of this resolution, that we wanted the American people to get vaccinated. And we also really wanted to make sure that our teachers could get vaccinated. Because people, Mr. Speaker, wanted to get their kids back in the classroom. And they wanted to get them back in the classroom safely and soundly. And I know we don't like to dwell on this pandemic period. But I share that because we reintroduced that resolution early into the 117th session of Congress. And I know we don't, well, maybe we do, maybe we don't want to dwell on some of the actions that occurred in the early days of the 117th session of the Congress. There was a attempt to certify the election that is usually pretty standard. We saw that happen this term, and it was, again, pretty standard. But on that day, on January 6th, I know people hear that day a lot. It was not so standard, and it was kind of frenzied, to say the least. And it was very divisive for this nation, and it was very divisive for this chamber. And I think it's fair to say that people are still not over it, and we need to be honest about that. But of course, we've taken thousands of votes since then, and of course, I thought it was responsible to continue to encourage and support our educators, the great Michigan Education Association, the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, these incredible unions that protect their members and make sure that they're getting, at the very least, fair pay, raises, pensions, and the like. Because gosh knows it's not easy to be a teacher, but it's certainly easier to be a teacher when you're safe from a deadly and lethal virus that killed 1 million Americans. Now, Mr. Speaker, to reflect on our present time and the moment we find ourselves in, it is right and fair for us and for me as a member of Congress who is the co-chair of the Manufacturing Caucus and is a ranking member on the Research and Technology Committee, subcommittee for the House Science Committee, to make some notes, snapshots of what is taking place right now. And it's not to accept that we have a lot of actions going on right now that are somewhat challenging to our Constitution. The Article 1 that is, important to read and remember and to recognize about how the nation's laws get passed, how the dollars get appropriated, and how the governing of our nation is authorized. And it is authorized through the Congress, through the House and the Senate. So, of course, it has been somewhat jaw-dropping to see a frontward leading of this nation by executive order. And this is not to break the rules of the House and pass insult. It is just a reflection. Because, of course, all of these reciprocal tariffs were announced. And Mr. Speaker, I'm just pulling up my note on these reciprocal tariffs because it was an executive office announcement to do reciprocal tariffs. On April 2nd, 25% tariff on all auto imports going into effect. And of course, I hail from Michigan, and I am well-versed alongside Mrs. Dingell in the functionality and the drivers of our American auto industry. And of course, that largely comes from the fact that I just was born in Metro Detroit. And I grew up around the car industry, and that my grandfather came to Michigan by way of Buffalo to work in a Ford plant and was a UAW member and raised 3 children and a big family and made a good life and got a good wage and moved to a bigger house in Warren. See, Mr. Speaker, why I had booked the special hour last week is that my father was visiting. My father, James R. Stevens, of Shelby Township. He now resides in Shelby Township. He's always been a hybrid Macomb, Wayne, and Oakland County man. And my father, Jim Stevens, was visiting. And it was the first time he has visited Washington since I was sworn in 2019. And we've been talking about this trip for a long time, to have my dad come and be a part of the Congress. So he got here on Tuesday, and then, boom, the votes were closed for the week. They ended votes. So Dad didn't get to come to the committee hearings that maybe to watch the floor, and I thought it would be neat to have him see me give an address for this length of time from watching in the gallery. Of course, he can always watch on C-SPAN, but I thought it would be nice to have him watch in the gallery. And I thought it would be nice to share a little bit about his life and his journey. I mentioned his father, who worked for Forbes, is how they call it back home, Forbes. It's a family business, the Forbes. And my father was born in 1945, January 3rd, 1945. It'd be interesting to look at what session of Congress was getting sworn in then, in such a different time in this nation's history. And yet, it's history, it's air that my father was breathing, even as an infant. America at the beginning of 1945, when a war was still being waged around this world. The real threat of tyranny, and some rightfully, and I join in this, say evil, was taking place. And America helped end that war, a world war in Asia and in Europe. That war gave us the word the Holocaust, a murdering of 6 million plus Jews whose names we can't in days even share because it is that many names. And so my father grew up in this post-World War II industrial world order that was being led by the United States of America. And so many remarkable things came about within our own country and with around the world from American leadership. what we were able to do with the auto industry, that arsenal of democracy, that engine of our military might, the Rosies filling in because the men were fighting, off serving in battle. Unbelievable and historic tales of bravery to the likes of something that we should continue to share for a very, very long time to come. But of course, this period of time was also met with some social change and progress and pushing. You know, not all the Rosies went back to the home. My mother's aunt, my great aunt, Ada, who was in Cleveland, who was I guess you could say she was a Rosie. She was in a factory. She was tough. She never married. And she worked so hard, and they kept her on in that factory after the war ended. And I really believe, Mr. Speaker, that this is a history that was shared and has been shared, not my family's history, but of course for our nation. It's been shared in so many brilliant and beautiful ways. Some people know about this movie, Forrest Gump, and it kind of captures in a lot of beautiful ways this plight of the 20th century America. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm a millennial. So I was born in 1983, not 40 years after the conclusion of World War II, but almost. And of course, the millennials, as we were closing out the 1900s, really felt as though America was at the top of the world. I mean, we were unstoppable. We invented the internet. Our auto industry was booming. The sport utility vehicle, Oakland County, Michigan being really one of the most wealthy, if not the wealthiest county in America. And that's to say that our auto industry really had continued into the late 1900s to propel the economic engine of this nation. And it's a thing of beauty because it wasn't the haves and have-nots. People were making money, not just the executives. Of course, we have a very strong and vibrant and incredible UAW, United Auto Workers Union, that at the end of the 1900s was very large in number, very powerful, and very right to stand up for hardworking men and women like my grandfather. And so, as we think about the 20th century, and we look at where we are now, the quarter 21st century, which I say this so much, it might drive some people crazy, but it's important to realize where we're standing and what moment we are in, because it's the mid-2020s. And it's a really exciting and inspiring time. I remember getting into Congress in the year 2019, and of course I was on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and we were recognizing in a committee hearing the 50-year anniversary of the moon landing. And some of my colleagues, I mean, they were alive and remembered when we landed on the moon. They of course, they remembered when they landed on the moon. My father remembers it. My mother does too, somewhat. That we sent people to the moon. And my contribution to that committee hearing, Mr. Speaker, was reflecting on that history is so deeply important, but articulating the moonshot of the next 50 years remains our imperative. And, of course, being the good representative I am of the state of Michigan, I believed that the moonshot of the next 50 years, and I still do, is hailing from the place that I call home. The advancements in mobility, where our auto industry is innovating and growing and moving towards. Now, Mr. Speaker, I came to Congress by way of an advanced manufacturing research lab. And I was working with a lot of incredible small manufacturers, mid-sized manufacturers, and even large-scale manufacturers in this space that the acronym IIoT captures, Industrial Internet of Things. And it, in short and simply, is the digitization of our manufacturing process. Now a lot of people are calling it artificial intelligence. How we design, produce, manufacture, and ship capital-intensive, large-scale equipment made of steel. Now, I happen to know enough about the auto industry and how complex and interconnected it is, that in Michigan we have this rich, unbelievable concentration of suppliers. We call them suppliers. And these are really unbelievable enterprises that put so much into making door panels, making interiors, making sure that we've got the full sweep of mobility opportunities from, of course, the engines, and we've got companies like Allison Transmission that is working on electric engines, and they're still, of course, doing the internal combustion engine, Mr. Speaker. And you have original equipment manufacturers who have been aggressive in ushering in their vision of a mobility future. It is no surprise for me to share in this House chamber what we've heard from the Chief Executive Officer of General Motors, Mary Barra, that 6 years ago she wanted to see a fully zero-emission General Motors. I was surprised to hear the vision in some respects, but also wanted to recognize that she had a vision. And she came to the bipartisan delegation of Michigan and said such a thing. And they're working on implementing new mobility. I haven't had a chance to ask her. Of course, I'm not a board member of General Motors. I have not had a chance to ask her at the half-decade mark where we are to becoming fully zero emission in the 2030, but I know that they're selling more and more of these electric vehicles, as well as internal combustion vehicles. And of course, Mr. Speaker, I find this exciting and thrilling as a steward of Michigan and Michigan's economy, as a younger individual who had worked in a political atmosphere on the presidential campaigns of 2008 and got to go work in the administration of Barack Obama in the Treasury Department. Sir, I was in the Treasury Department. And Mr. Speaker, I know we don't hail from the same party. Of course, you're sitting in the Speaker's chair. But what was so remarkable about the start of the Obama administration in the Treasury Department, right there on East Executive Way, it's basically a part of the White House campus, is that the Obama administration officials came in and were met by Bush administration officials. And we tangoed, we worked together, we danced together on behalf of a nation in an economic recession. We call it a GR, capital GR, Great Recession this nation was in. And a lot of unbelievable and painful things were happening, of course, Mr. Speaker. First of all, the housing industry was going kaput, to say it lightly. There was a massive foreclosure crisis. There was a run on banks and equity firms like Lehman Brothers. They had this whole Wall Street endeavor that the Bush administration, alongside the House of Representatives, had to engage in. But there was this hanging issue around our auto industry and the fact that the capital markets and the lack of sound healthcare policy in this nation, our companies were shouldering every burden of, not burden, but responsibility of healthcare. People need healthcare, Mr. Speaker. We know that, all right? Aging is real. I talked to my dad about it. I said, Dad, let's do it, the doctor checklist, and he's got hearing, and he's got throat, and he's got mobility, his physical mobility, and on and on and on. His mental faculties are incredible. Yay for that. But there's a need for medical attention as people get older. And the UAW rightfully protects their retirees, and we're proud of what they're able to do for their retirees. But the country, pre-ACA, Affordable Care Act, ran into some severe challenges. And Ford had gotten its loan before the recession hit, and General Motors and Chrysler hadn't done that. And they were tragically and frighteningly staring bankruptcy in the face. So, Mr. Speaker, what I was able to do is, being the passionate 20-something-year-old I was from my state, grappling with this presidential election that I was a part of and saw go to victory, I thought, should I go back to Michigan, or should I and maybe, I don't know, work in a car dealership or something? I didn't even, it's not my degree, but I thought maybe I could help. And then I heard they were going to do an auto initiative, an auto rescue. So I put up my hand to work on that auto rescue. And by fate and chance, I met a man named Steve Ratner in the halls of President Barack Obama's transition office. And I nearly convinced Mr. Speaker that as he heard my thick Midwestern accent, he decided to bring me on as his chief of staff, needing someone from Michigan who didn't have ethical conflicts with a managed industrial bankruptcy of General Motors and Chrysler. We didn't hire anyone out of the auto industry. We didn't want to have conflicts. We brought together this amazing team. It didn't matter who voted for what. We just got the best talent in and put forward an initiative, an industrial initiative to the likes that this nation had never seen. And yes, sir, it was money, the taxpayer money out of the Troubled Asset Relief Program. GM, General Motors, left the stock market. I reflected on the 15-year anniversary of this auto rescue last year in this chamber during another one of these addresses. And Mr. Speaker, it was really quite remarkable because GM left the stock market. They did a new initial public offering, an IPO. They got back on the stock market. They repaid the government. The government actually made some money off of the investment that they made in the companies. We had an old company. We had a brownfield initiative for some of the stuff that was going by the wayside. And of course, my friends at the UAW remind that too many plants have shuttered this century. In the year 2025, if you look at the last 25 years, too many plants have shuttered, which is why it's really quite outrageous, Mr. Speaker, to hold up this article from the Detroit News that was written on April 4th of this year, that a stunning number of battery factories are being canceled. Why are factories being canceled in the year 2025, Mr. Speaker? Are we supposed to call the Chinese Communist Party and ask them to go and get these batteries and start making these batteries? Are we just not going to have batteries made in the United States of America? Why would it be acceptable to have battery plants shutter in the United States of America? This isn't an exercise of ego or id or personhood. This is about people's lives. This is about how we manufacture and produce in the United States of America. I don't like reading that factories are being closed, Mr. Speaker. I don't like reading another headline written by Patricia Cohen on April 3rd that says the trade war that we are in risks forfeiting America's economic primacy. Now, this is just one article. There's another one. I don't know who Orrin Cass is. He's a chief economist at American Compass. I guess it's a conservative think tank. That's what this printout says. And he writes a newsletter on Understanding America. And Mr. Cass says, stop freaking out. Tariffs can still work. Well, I guess that's the debate that we're in. What I don't like, though, Mr. Speaker, with the tariff proposal that was so aggressive and coming down at us so fast and hard, and I value so much my relationship and the leadership of Shawn Fain at the UAW, the United Auto Workers Union, that is looking at this and saying, well, maybe we can finally start to get our fair share. Maybe we can have a little reciprocity. Maybe the industrial world order that we brought together in 1945 and beyond is a time that we, of course, need to honor and recognize and appreciate. But for 2025, we do need to look at who is buying American cars and how we are setting the rules of the road. Because I had the privilege as a member of Congress last term to go and have a NATO meeting. I got invited to a NATO meeting over in Portugal. And it was very exciting to be with a bipartisan delegation of members of Congress for a few days. It was during a recess period. I thought it was worthwhile to do it. And I was actually shocked that there were not American cars in Portugal. I thought, oh my goodness gracious, where are your Fords? Where are your General Motors? Where Chevys? Anything? My goodness gracious. I mean, we boast and love making in Michigan and selling to the world. I do this program called Manufacturing Monday. Hundreds of vehicles that, hundreds of parts components that get made and into any car. But I've visited hundreds of manufacturers, Mr. Speaker, and I mean, really, I go into their factory floors. It's not a showboat thing. It's a geek out. It's really exciting to geek out with these makers and innovators. It really is an amazing thing to go and see this stuff in action. And they're selling all over the world, and they're employing people in Michigan and all over our country, and it's a really delightful thing. And it's important to our economy. So we want to keep doing that. And we want to sell our nameplates. Jeep is a fantastic brand. I'm not trying to sell cars on the house floor, okay? I'm just mentioning that we're not seeing a lot of them overseas, Mr. Speaker. So when we have this approach, what was called Liberation Day, and we'll see what unfolds from it, where we have been grappling and frustrated and watching as Michiganders is this tariff policy on Canada. Now, I have this other article here that someone sent me. Using tariffs to make Canada a state, ? It has been tried before by Joseph Thorndike. Mr. Speaker, could I just do a quick time check? How am I doing here on time? How much time do I have left?
21 minutes remaining.
The gentlewoman has 21 minutes remaining.
Fabulous. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Because I'd like to read Thorndike's words. Okay, and again, I'm not using a name. We're hearing in the zeitgeist musing about plans to annex Canada. I am not musing that. I'm a member of Congress. I don't think we need to annex Canada. Personally, I love the relationship that the United States has with Canada. I'm in a border state. We have a lot of Canadians who immigrate to the United States. They marry Michiganders. They live in our neighborhoods. Some of their workers come in and work in our hospitals. We got these great nurses. Of course, we have a phenomenal manufacturing partnership with Canada. I mean, you have a lot of shared memberships with the union. Remember, it's an international union. So the UAW has members in Canada. The trades have members in Canada. And even the steelworkers, right, who are very important to all of this as well, and who know very much what good tariff policy could mean for them, and I support them in that. But we don't need to be bullying Canada to become an annexed state. We need to make sure that we have strengthened security and good trade. So when we hear, Mr. Speaker, oh my goodness gracious, about blanket tariffs on our neighbors from the north. All aluminum imports face a 25% tariff. Well, that's coming from Canada. Now, I am the co-chair of the Aluminum Caucus, Mr. Speaker. It's a bipartisan caucus. And I've got these relationships in the aluminum sector. And they're telling me that they've got these smelters that American companies have in Canada that are making the aluminum. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen aluminum get made, but it's like baking a cake. I mean, it's really, and steel and all of that. I mean, the steel, oh my gosh. And when I was working for the president in 2009 and 10, we spent time with the steel workers and the steel making process. Well, these smelters are $6 billion. So it confuses me of how we're going to get a $6 billion smelter in the United States of America, which maybe we should do that. It would be nice to do, but where are you going to get the $6 billion? You know, these Wall Street people are all upset about the market right now. I mean, we had a really great industrial policy in 22. A bill I helped author, the CHIPS and Science Act, Mr. Speaker. It was a very bipartisan initiative. And it was money that we put out into the marketplace to say we will have chip manufacturing in the United States of America. It was a sizable amount of taxpayer dollars to say that we would have chip manufacturing. But what was even more incredible, Mr. Speaker, is that, yes, it was sizable dollars, but it was matched, quadrupled by the private sector. A public-private partnership. So the initiative, CHIPS and Science, actually paid for itself 4 times over by the conclusion of the previous president's term. So I think we need a very comprehensive industrial policy that matches the moment of time that we are in, Mr. Speaker. Of course, strategic tariffs that the previous president and the president before did have helped, but we're feeling the squeeze in Michigan. And it's news unfolding before our eyes. Again, I referenced the article here, a stunning number of battery factories being canceled. We just read about another Intel factory in Ohio. I met with these remarkable people at the laborers union this morning, or just as it was heading into afternoon time, rather. And I met with the Laborers International Union and the members from Michigan who hail from all over the state were sharing with me some of their concerns. They were saying to me, Mr. Speaker, that there are projects that are going to shutter, that there's a bridge in Bay City that has been demolished and has had concrete set, and we have a good congresswoman from Bay City who's aware of that project, of course. But they're saying if the dollars get canceled, we're not going to have a bridge, and they're not going to be able to complete it. And it's an insult to their work. It's an insult to their labor. Then, of course, Mr. Speaker, we have another concern of our laborers, which is an enterprise that I had mentioned, the largest polysilicon manufacturer in the country, actually the only one, and one of 3 in the world. It's this very remarkable enterprise called Hemlock, and they receive some tax credits from industrial policy legislation that we passed in the 117th session of the Congress. And this is so very essential to our country and our world's manufacturing prowess. And I really, Mr. Speaker, do not want to go overseas for that polysilicon. And I want to see the work of polysilicon manufacturing in the United States of America expand and grow. I would like to see it expand and grow. But what my friends at the Laborers Union shared with me, Mr. Speaker, is that if we cancel the credits and if we squeeze out the money, the work will stop. Why would we hand that gift to our competitor? And I say this from this chamber as one vote and one voice to just continue to push for sound and reasoned industrial policy. Not everything needs to be a reaction to who's in charge. Look, Mr. Speaker, today I have put forward an announcement from my office about bills to lower cost, reintroducing 4 bills that I wrote last term in the Congress. The Healthy Affordable Housing Act that I have reintroduced with my colleague, Congressman Richie Torres, the Fix Moldy Housing Act, the First-Time Homeowner Savings Plan Act, and the Home Accessibility Tax Credit Act. These are all bills I just introduced today. Some of them had Republicans on them last term. The Home Accessibility Tax Credit Act is a great bill, and I'm proud to have Senator Angus King as my companion on this bill, a refundable tax credit to help seniors and Americans with disabilities, including our veterans, retrofit their homes to meet their accessibility needs. For in the United States of America, Mr. Speaker, we want everyone to succeed. We want everyone who can work to have access to a good job. In 2023, Detroit reached its highest level of jobs in over 50 years, Mr. Speaker. People were moving in to the city of Detroit. It's really something else to see that happen. And it is not to ignore the frustration and the pain of high costs. And I am not here, and I am not standing here in part because the rules don't allow it, but it is appropriate to not play the blame game. It's important to play the solution game for the United States of America. And so as somebody who served in a bipartisan way, yes, I was an appointee of the administration of the 2-term President Barack Obama. I served in his first term on the U.S. Auto Rescue, the initiative responsible for saving General Motors and Chrysler and hundreds of thousands of Michigan jobs, and very clearly, sir, millions of jobs across this great nation. It was really something else. I mean, they were saying, don't let them liquidate. We didn't let them liquidate. We went forward, and we did the right thing. And coming into Congress and starting the Democratic Manufacturing Working Group, becoming the co-chair of the Manufacturing Caucus, starting the Women in STEM Caucus, becoming a co-chair of the Robotics and Internet Caucus, and passing things like the American Manufacturing Leadership Act, making sure that we had an export-import bank that was reauthorized. We did that in the 116th session of the Congress, so that we can export, so that we can sell American-made goods. For the question really is, Mr. Speaker, as we look out to the mid-century mark, waving maybe frantically goodbye as much as we want to cling to the great half-century of America in the 20th century, we know that competition is ripe. that we know that we cannot rest. And that when you talk to auto workers and auto executives, they know how ferocious that competition is with the Chinese Communist Party. Competition, it's a competition, but they are a different system of government and business. And our preference is to say that, well, we'd certainly like to do business how we do business, but they're a different society, and they somehow got into the WTO and didn't really adopt some of the ways that we do business. We want to make sure that the economic might of the United States of America continues to lead the free world. And so while this chamber may be largely empty because we remain very busy in the nation's capital, and I do not expect my colleagues to listen to me deliver such an address, Mr. Speaker, I do say that this is something, I do dare say, Mr. Speaker, that this is something that we can all agree on and that we can all work on, and that approaches and sentiments and certainly emotions, which run high in politics, of course, might differ. The idea that America should and must win and must continue to propel and to inspire is a vibrant, growing economy and democracy is what should win the day. So in speaking, Mr. Speaker, from my humble perch as a representative of the great state of Michigan, that is my contribution to the halls of this chamber this afternoon. Thank you, and I yield back.